Matthew chapter number 6. And in the first 18 verses, we have seen that Jesus demands the sincere devotion of the heart to God the Father. And as we move into chapter 6, verses 19 through the end of the chapter, we see that Jesus demands undivided trust in God the Father, no matter what the circumstances. In Matthew 6:19 through 24, which we will be looking at this morning, we see why believers must be exclusively devoted to God. The Lord and the things of the Lord must be more important to us than anything else in life. If they are not, then we will be distracted from serving Him exclusively. You may not be aware of this, but people are plagued by worry. I know you're aware of that. They worry about money. They worry about children. They worry about health. They worry about tornadoes. They worry about hurricanes. They worry about forest fires. They worry, with good reason, maybe about the direction our country's heading. They worry about the world situation. They worry if their money will last long enough to take them until the time they die. They take tranquilizers to calm down. They drink coffee or energy drinks to get them going. They drink alcohol to help them forget and relax. They take sleeping pills to help them get to sleep at night. What a mess. As we begin our study of Matthew 16:19 through 24, we see that we must be exclusively devoted to God rather than something else, because the things of the world are so perishable. Now, it didn't used to seem that way to me when I was several years younger. I'm still not real old. I'm a long way from having caught up with Buddy or Aubrey. The things of the world are so perishable. When I was first married, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. The insurance man was trying to sell me a life insurance policy for $10,000, telling me that it was all I would ever need. That was in 1965 or 6. 10,000, all I would ever need. You can't even buy a good used car for $10,000 anymore. Times have changed. Rather than seeking to accumulate wealth in this life, Jesus is instructing those hearing and reading the Sermon on the Mount to be concerned with eternity's values. He's calling on them to stop laying up treasures for themselves on the earth. Instead, they're to lay up treasures for themselves in heaven. Wherever they're laying up treasures will reveal where their heart is, whether here on earth or in heaven. And as we continue in the Sermon on the Mount, you must understand that a lot of this is directed against the Pharisees, who were laying up treasures for themselves on the earth. And so he says in verse number 19, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal." Jesus is instructing his hearers not to be concerned about accumulating wealth in this world. Now, understand something. He is not saying that it is wrong to have wealth in this world. He is saying that we should not be all wrapped up in accumulating wealth. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth is a command whose tense and mood indicate that this was already being done and needed to be stopped. It's therefore understood in the sense of stop laying up or storing up for yourselves treasures upon earth, or do not continue laying up or storing up for yourselves treasures upon the earth. You see, the problem with people that are so concerned about laying up for themselves treasures on the earth is that wealth is their God. Again, it's not wrong to have wealth. It's where's the heart in relation to the wealth. If the only thing that we're after in life is money, we're pursuing after the wrong goal. Yes, it takes money to live, and it takes more money to live today than it used to. Especially when you see what medical costs are these days, okay? Or just insurance for medical costs. I think we pay more in medical insurance in this day and age. Oh, I know we do. A lot more than we ever made. You go back a few years. It's just the way it is. Treasures stored up on earth may not last, as is indicated by where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal indicates. Now, I know you older folks know what moths do to clothing, but I'm not sure you younger ones really know, because we don't have this problem anymore. We used to have cedar-lined closets and mothballs. Now today, I'm not sure whether our teens know what mothballs were used for, but moths would lay eggs in garments, particularly wool. And then the eggs would hatch, and the larvae just loved eating wool. And so you take out your garment that you had stored up over the summer, getting ready to wear it in the next winter, and you hold it up to the light, and there's light shining through it in places it didn't used to, because there are holes in it. The moth's larvae ate those things. Now, we've changed things a lot in our society, and one of the things is the material out of which many of our clothing is made. But moths will ruin clothing. Rust, of course, you're familiar with, especially if you've lived somewhere else where cars do rust. Rust speaks of corrosion, which eats at various things like metals. And when it says these do corrupt, it means they destroy or they ruin. Its tense indicates something that can normally be expected to occur. Now, I know they have changed things in undercoating cars and in treating them in such a way that they don't show the rust they once did. But if you happen to live in the Midwest, where there was a lot of salt on the roads every winter, if your car didn't have bad rust issues after about 5 years, you were fortunate, especially if you lived on a gravel road. It was awful. You had to buy a different car, either that or it looked like it was going to fall apart. I remember one of my cars. It was a little orange Toyota. And we teased about painting black spots on it and calling it a ladybug. Well, I saw my car about 5 years after I got rid of it, and somebody had it in a body shop, and I recognized it. And what happened is it had one of these old unibody constructions, which means there was no frame under it, and it was in a V shape now with the middle going across, collapsed because of rust. I'd never seen that on a car before, but my car did that. Why? called rust. Rust ruins things. That's why we keep them painted. That's why we keep them clean. That's why we avoid contact with certain things, because it corrodes. And there's something else. There are people out there that would like to separate you from all your money and all your possessions. They would. And they try. And that's why some of you have things that would be disincentives in your home for people breaking in. You don't want somebody breaking into your home. I don't either. I think the best protection we have is the Lord. Thieves break through and steal. And then what happens to all of your wealth? It can be gone. Cars, you put your wealth into a car. It wouldn't be the first time it got stolen or wrecked. Now what? You put your home into, or your wealth into a home, and then all of a sudden there's a fire, and your home is no more. Pile of rubble. We all understand how these things work. Be careful about putting your whole life into things that may perish. Treasures on earth consist of many things for many people. Homes, wealth, farms, cars. How about reputation, families, success? The problem with these earthly treasures is that they can be so easily removed, and not necessarily by you. But verse 20 goes on, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. We have a statement here in contrast to what we saw in verse 19. Whereas verse 19 indicates where treasures should not be stored up, verse 20 indicates where they should be stored up. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven suggests this is what we are to be doing. They will last, as where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through and steal. You'll not have the same problems there that you have on earth. There aren't any moths that are going to eat whatever's in heaven. There is no rust that's going to be in heaven. And there aren't going to be any thieves in heaven. So I ask, how do I go about laying up treasures in heaven when I can't get there yet? I was trying to go here a couple of weeks ago, and my wife keeps praying me out of heaven. What am I supposed to do? I didn't make it yet. I will one day, but it wasn't the right time, I guess. The Lord answered her prayers. Now she's stuck with me again. The answer is simple. Simply by being saved and living for the Lord and putting Him first in my life is going to end up in laying up treasures in heaven. It's not some big complicated thing. Living a godly life has not only rewards in this life, but also in the life to come. I'm going to have you turn to a few passages here that say these things in a different way. Go to 1 Timothy chapter 6, first of all. And as we look here, we see starting in verse number 6, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. Okay, you got that? You aren't taking anything with you when it's time to go. All right? Doesn't matter if it's a long-lost souvenir that you finally got back. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out, and having food and raiment or clothing, let us be therewith content. But they that will be rich, and it doesn't mean that are rich. It means will to be rich or determine to be rich. Fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts. You see, the goal of getting rich leads people to do things they should not do in order to get rich. If God blesses you with wealth, so be it. But don't do wrong in order to get wealth. Some people try to rob banks in order to get wealth. Some people cheat in order to get wealth. Don't do things like that. God's able to meet your needs. He's able to give you wealth if he thinks you can handle it, but maybe he doesn't want you to have it, at least in your younger years. He wants you to learn to trust him. For he goes on, they that will to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition or ruin. For the love of money is the root of all evil. Did you notice that? It does not say that money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. You can have money without loving it, and you can be poor and have no money but love it. Loving money is the problem, not having money or not having money. He then says, charge them that are rich in this world. I've dropped down to verse 17. That they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. God gives us what we need. That's where our trust needs to be, is in him. That they do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willing to communicate or to share, laying up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. Turn over to Colossians chapter number 3. A couple of good verses at the beginning of that chapter. By the way, the whole chapter is a good chapter, as are all the rest of the chapters in the Bible. I don't want to say that one's more important than the other, because they are all the Word of God. Colossians 3, 1 through 3, you might be able to quote this one. That's fine. It's a good one to memorize. If ye then be risen with Christ, and as a believer you are, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. I'm amazed at how many things people are interested in and collect. 5 minutes after you're dead, how important will those things be? Be careful. You need to go after the things that are important in life and not waste your time and your life on trivialities that will never make any difference in eternity. So I ask you, what is the most important thing in your life? What do you value more than anything else? Verse 21, I'm going back to Matthew 6. Matthew 6, 21 this time. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Where you value things the most, that's where your heart is. Verse 21 is indicating that wherever one is laying up treasure for himself will demonstrate where his heart is. There where your treasure is, in that place will your heart be also. It indicates, it'll show what you really love, what is most important to you in life. This verse is not hinting that there's anything wrong with being wealthy. It's speaking of someone's love for money and the things it can buy. How many shoes can you wear? But we hear about people who have lots and lots and lots and lots of shoes, 80 or 90 pair. Come on, isn't that a bit extravagant? How many shoes do you need? I need one pair, I've got two. What else do I need? I know. Some of you have more than I do, and that's fine. You have all you want, but there are more important things in life than accumulating hundreds of pairs of shoes. By the way, where are you going to store them? And how come the women's closets have to be so much bigger than the men's? I tease my wife every once in a while. I had to move out of the joint closet a long time ago. There wasn't enough room for my 5 shirts and my 3 pair of pants. Listen, it's all right to have a nice wardrobe. That's not the issue. But be careful that that's not where your heart is. All right? So where's my treasure? Where's your treasure? Is it in the things of the Lord and in the Lord himself? Is he the most important thing in my life? Or do I have something else or some other things that I value more than I value the Lord? Something else that is more important to me than the Lord and living for him? If I do have something more important in my life than the Lord and the things of the Lord, then you know that makes me an idolater, because those things have become my God. Don't do that. Thou shalt have no other God before me. And if you make something a God, this jealous God that we worship might just see to it that you lose it one way or another. Not only must we be exclusively devoted to God because the things of the world are so perishable, but we must also be exclusively devoted to God because otherwise our vision is adversely affected. Having spiritual eyes are necessary, healthy spiritual eyes are necessary to discern spiritual truth. Saved people have healthy spiritual eyes, and they're able to discern spiritual truth, whereas unsaved people have diseased spiritual eyes and are unable to discern spiritual truth. The Pharisees' eyes were incapable of discerning spiritual truth because their eyes were diseased. They were unsaved people. The light of the body is the eye, in verse 22. If therefore thine eye be single, it doesn't mean is unmarried. If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. The light of the eye is the body means that the lamp of the body is the eye. It's through the eye that an individual sees. A person with a good eye is able to see things around him. Through a healthy spiritual eye, an individual is able to perceive spiritual truth. Therefore, it draws an inference from the statement, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single is a condition which makes no assumption regarding its truth. It may or may not be true depending on the person. It will be single for some, but it will not be single for others. It means if your eye is without guile, if your eye is sincere, if your eye is straightforward, It means if your eye is without a hidden agenda. It pertains to being motivated by singleness of purpose so as to be open and above board. And it's in a financial context. It's preceded about laying up treasure in heaven as opposed to laying up treasure on earth. And it's followed by the need for serving God rather than money. Your eye being single refers to someone who does not have a hidden agenda for gaining wealth. Don't have a hidden agenda for gaining wealth. That's what the Pharisees were all about. Thy whole body shall be full of light suggests that this person will be spiritually healthy. He'll be filled with spiritual light, enlightened, and as a result, greatly blessed by God. The person who has an eye for God, pursuing after God, will be blessed. The person who has an eye for money, no matter how he can get it, is not going to have the blessing that comes from God. But if thine eye be evil, verse 23, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? Here's the opposite of a healthy eye. It's an evil eye. It's one that is characterizing the Pharisees. Your eye, Pharisees, is sick. The result of this is your whole body shall be full of darkness. As a result of this spiritual darkness, he is an unsaved individual. John chapter 3, verses 18 through 21 goes right along this line. I'd like you to turn to John chapter 3 quickly, please. It says this, he that believeth on him is not condemned. That's speaking about a saved person believing on Jesus. But he that believeth not is condemned already. And the reason is given, and I want you to notice, it's not because he's such a terrible sinner. It's simply because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the condemnation that light has come into the world. That would be spiritual light, Jesus being that light. And men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. They would rather have their sin than have and be able to continue doing it than have forgiveness of sins, with the implication that a person needs to start living for the Lord. They don't want what happens. They'd rather go to hell with their friends. They don't know what they're getting into. For every one that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be manifest, or may be clearly seen that they are wrought in God, that they have been done or carried out in God. John 1:5 says it this way, the light shineth in darkness. The spiritual light shines into spiritual darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not. Along the same line, John 8:12 says, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. You don't need to turn to this one, but 1 John 1:5 and 6 says, this then is the message which we've heard of him, and declare unto you that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him and walk or live or conduct our lives in darkness, in spiritual darkness, we're lying. We're not doing the truth. 1 John 2, 8 through 11. Again, a new commandment I write unto thee, which thing is true in him and in you, because the darkness is past, and the true light now shineth. He that saith he's in the light and hateth his brother is in darkness even until now. He that hateth his brother or loveth his brother abideth in the light, and there's none occasion of stumbling in him, but he that hateth his brother is in darkness, and walketh in darkness, and knoweth not whither he goeth, because that darkness hath blinded his eyes. You see, the person who has been genuinely saved will live as if he is in the light. The person who is only pretending will still be living like an unsaved person, because that's exactly what he is. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, 12 through 16. You don't need to turn to this in the interest of time, but you can turn back to Matthew 6, 23, because that's where I'm going next, all right? Let me read this. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us of God, which things also we speak, not in the words which man's wisdom teacheth, but which the Holy Ghost teacheth, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. Now, the pastor preached on this here a couple of weeks ago, but he didn't do much with the last phrase, and that's what I'm going through this to do. The natural man, that's the unsaved man, receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for their foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. But he that is spiritual judgeth all things, yet he himself is judged of no man. For who hath known the mind of the Lord that he may instruct him? And the answer is nobody. But then I want you to pay attention to this next phrase. But we who are believers, we have the mind of Christ. Where do we get this mind of Christ? We have it in the Bible. The Bible expresses the mind of Christ. You know, when I was growing up, I don't think I ever failed to know what my father wanted me to do, whether he said it or not. I'm sure that my sons always knew what I wanted them to do without my telling them. Did they always do it? They had old sin natures also. We have the mind of Christ in the Bible. Do we always pay attention to it? We need to. Back to Matthew 6:23. If the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? If you're an unsaved person, you will not have the ability to perceive spiritual truth. In the context, the Pharisees were spiritually blind, but thought they were spiritually enlightened. They did not perceive that their lost condition was indicated by the fact that they were guilty of the sin of coveting wealth, in addition to many other sins. One of the things they did was they cheated widows out of their homes. Well, one more verse. Not only must we be exclusively devoted to God because the things of the world are so perishable, and because otherwise our vision is adversely affected, but also we must be exclusively devoted to God because it's impossible to serve two masters. Verse 24. Jesus continues here to point out ways in which his listeners' righteousness must exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. They were characterized by greed, but it's impossible to serve two masters. If someone is serving money, he cannot be serving God. He cannot have a divided loyalty in his Christian service. Very simply, no man can serve two masters. Nobody is able to be serving two lords or two masters. Why? For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will hold to the one and despise the other. He cites two extremes. I mean, you might have two people that are giving orders to you, and you might really like one and really dislike the other one. Or it might be that you like one about 55% and the other one about 45%. But they're giving contradictory orders. For purposes of getting the listener's attention, he uses extremes. And then he states it. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. What is mammon? Money. You cannot be serving God as your God and at the same time serving money as your God. The scribes and Pharisees who were serving money were not able to serve God. They needed to be saved so they would receive a genuine desire to serve God. So I ask myself as I draw it to a conclusion, what is it that I am serving? And you must ask yourselves, what is it that you are serving? I could phrase it this way, what is my aim in life? Or, what is your aim in life? As believers, it must be our aim in life to be loving and serving the Lord our God with all our hearts and souls and minds and strengths in the place and capacity of his choosing. We have seen that we must be exclusively devoted to God because the things of the world are so perishable, because otherwise our vision is affected and because it's impossible to serve two masters. So let's be aware of this and let's focus in on serving the Lord completely with all that we have and all that we are for as long as he gives us breath.